Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm. In this video, we are going to create an endless runner video game. So kind of like Subway Surfers or Temple Run. We're going to make a game like that. Our game, however, is going to be viewed from the side. We're going to have a character who's constantly running, and whenever enemies get to it, they're going to jump over the enemies. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to make. It's going to be really a fun project, but it's going to take it's gonna require us to just kind of access all the stuff that we've learned so far in Python development. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we need to do is, well, we probably want to put our name on our work, and then we're going to want to let's call this Endless Runner. Okay, now we need to think about what libraries we need to import. Obviously, we need Turtle. That is definitely required. But we're also going to want to bring in Random, because we want some randomness with the enemies. We want them to randomly spawn at different intervals and go at different speeds, so the game's a little bit more fun. And we're also going to need Time. The reason why we're going to import Time is so that we can create some delays and create a spawner mechanic, which is going to spawn enemies at a specific interval. But all that will be probably in the next video. For this video, we're just going to focus on getting our player working. So let's go ahead and set up our screen just like we always do. We'll call it S equals turtle.screen. Let's set the background color to, let's do sky blue. Sky blue is a good color. And let's set up our screen to be, let's say 800 wide by 400 tall. Okay, let's test that out, see what that looks like. Okay, I'm happy with that. That sounds good to me. Alrighty. Next, we need to create a ground. We basically need a place for our player to kind of stand on, right? So we'll call this G for ground. And this is going to be a turtle. Now before, we would normally use this turtle to draw a rectangle and then fill it in, but we're not going to do that with this one. I'm going to show you a little trick that we can use with turtles that will save you some time. So we're going to change the shape of this turtle to a square. We're going to change the color of the turtle to green. And we're going to use this property called shape size. And when we use shape size, we can actually stretch our shape to a certain size. So for example, if I want to stretch the width, which is how long the turtle is, how wide the turtle is on my screen, or actually, sorry, they're a little bit, these terms, I would have changed them if I was the one creating Python Turtle. Width is actually how tall it is. I know it doesn't sound, it's kind of counterintuitive. I'm going to say 10 for the width. That's, again, how tall it is. The length is how wide it is. And I'm going to set this to 100. All right. Then let's do pen up. And let's put our ground where we want it to go. We'll say 0 and, I don't know, negative 80 on the Y probably. Let's go ahead and run that and see what that looks like. And there we go. I'm probably going to I'm going to push that down just a little bit more because I can see some sky underneath. So let's go negative 70. Oh, no, actually, I needed to go the other direction. Oh, not 1,000. Let's go 100. Looks great. So we have our field here. We have sky. Super, super easy to do. All right, let's create a player. Give ourselves some space here. All right. Player. So we're going to call this player P. That's a good name for a player. Turtle.turtle. And we're going to do the same thing with the player. We're going to create a shape of a square. And let's set its color to black. And let's put it where we want them to go. So we'll pick up our pen. And we'll make it go to, let's do negative 200 on the X. And we'll do, I don't know, negative 110 on the Y. Let's see what that looks like. That's a little bit too far down, actually. Let's bring it up, because I want it to be more toward the top. Let's bring it up to, let's say, negative 50. That's a little bit better, because I want them to jump. So I want the enemies coming in like this, and I want them to be able to jump over enemies, and I want it to look nice. All right, cool. So negative 50 is where I'm putting mine. You can put yours wherever you want. Now, there is going to be some code later on that's going to basically force ourselves to not be able to go below that line. So make sure you remember where you're placing your player on the Y, okay? Alrighty, so the next thing we need to do is we want to create a jumping mechanic. So we want our player to be able to jump whenever we press the space bar. So to do that, we're going to need a couple of things. First, we're going to need something called a key listener. I did spell that right. So we're going to need a key listener, and we're going to attach that to our screen. So s.listen. And what that's telling our screen to do is basically listen for any kind of input. And the input that we're going to look for is a key press. So we'll say s.onKeyPress. We're going to do something. Now, I'm not going to put this in here yet because we haven't written this yet. What we need is we need a function. So onKeyPress is going to allow us to press a button, and when we press a button, it's going to run a function. So let's actually create that function. I'm going to put it right here. Okay. So let's define our function. We'll call it jump. And inside this jump function, we basically want to check to see something. We want to check to see if our player is jumping currently or not. If they're currently jumping, then we don't want to continue to jump because we don't want to be able to jump forever. We only want to jump if they're not already jumping. So we need to create a variable on our player. So let's go back to our player section and let's create a new variable called is_jumping. And we're going to set it equal to false to begin with. Now, this is a variable called a Boolean variable. Boolean variables are special variables that can only be true or false. So we're going to set this to false at the beginning. When we start jumping, we're going to set it to true. When we're no longer jumping, we're going to set it back to false, right? And that's going to allow us to only jump if we're not already jumping. Okay. A couple things we also need in here is we need a direction on the Y because we're about to move our player up on the Y-axis whenever we make them go up. But we also need a downward force as well. So we're going to have an up force and a down force. Let's call our up force dy, meaning direction on the Y. We'll set it equal to 0 for now. And let's call our down force gravity. And we'll set gravity equal to negative 0.6. Okay. Now we'll create some gravity here soon whenever we write our main game loop. But these are the variables we're going to need to make it actually jump properly. So let's go back to our jump function here. And let's say if not is underscore listening. Nope, not listening, not is jumping. I don't know what my brain just did there. So, and it's actually p dot is jumping. P dot is jumping. So if our player is not jumping. I know this looks confusing. So if not is jumping. So basically it's the same as if our player is not already jumping. Then we are going to set the dy equal to 12. So that's the force that we're going to apply to it going up. Okay. Then we want to change it to is jumping. We're going to set that equal to true because that means we're in the middle of the air. We're actually jumping now. Okay, so that's our whole jump function. Super, super easy. So in this onKeyPress, we need to designate the function we want to call, which is jump. And we're not going to use the open and close parentheses, by the way, on this. It's just going to look for the function by its name. And the key that we're going to press to make it jump is space. Okay, so that's what we've got there. So our player, our screen is listening for a key press. If that key press is space, then it's going to call the jump function. The jump function is going to check to see if the player is currently jumping. If it is, it's going to ignore this. If it's not, it's going to set its direction on the Y to 12, and it's going to change is jumping to true. Okay, so now we need to handle everything else. We need to handle falling constantly. We need to handle taking that direction on the Y and actually applying it to specific movement over time. Now, the way we're going to do this is we're going to create something called a game loop. All video games have something called a game loop, and that loop is basically just controlling all the things that need to happen every frame of the game. Okay, so we need to write our game loop. Let's do that here. We'll call it game loop. And the first thing we want to do is create a new variable that handles whether or not our game is over. If our game is over, we don't want the loop to run at all. We don't want anything to happen. We basically want our game to freeze if the game is over. Okay, so we'll say game underscore over equals false. Okay, because the game's not over at the very beginning. It'd be a very boring game if the game was over before we even started. So the game over is equal to false. And we're going to create a while loop. A while loop is a great loop because it'll allow us to continue to loop until a certain condition is met, right? Or until a certain condition is no longer met, right? So we'll say while not game over. Basically, while game over is not true. So while the game is still going. So first thing we need to do is update our screen every frame. What that's going to do is it's going to basically take all the changes we're about to write in this code and apply it at the top of the next frame. So we get smooth movement in our game instead of like this really jerky, you know, kind of crazy stuff as Python's trying to draw everything. So we're going to update our screen at the top of the frame. We are going to apply gravity. So direction Y plus equals P dot gravity. That's going to constantly apply gravity to our player all the time, even while it's jumping. Now, the nice thing is, because our jump force is more than our gravity, then we're going to actually be able to override the gravity when we're jumping. But as soon as we're no longer applying that force, it's going to push us right back down. Okay. Next, we want to create a variable called Y. Y is basically just going to check the coordinate of our player on the Y, right? The reason why we want to do that is because we want to check to see if our player has fallen below where we started. If we have, then we're going to push it right back up to the start, and we're going to reset is jumping to false, right? So that way we can jump again. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if we've hit the ground, right? So we're going to say Y equals P dot Y core, so the Y coordinate of the player, plus P dot DY, or the direction on the Y, okay? So Y is now going to be storing the current coordinate of the player's Y value plus whatever direction we're going to apply to it. If we're jumping, then we're going to apply that jump force. If we're not, it's going to apply gravity. Okay. And we're going to say if Y is less than, and this is where we need to pay attention to what we started with. Okay. So notice that my player is going to negative 50, right? So I want to check to see if Y is less than negative 50. If you put your player in any other Y value, then you need to use the one that you put into your code, right? The reason why is because I want it to always start and stop at negative 50, okay? So if Y is less than negative 50, then we're going to set Y equal to negative 50. Basically, that's saying if you ever go below negative 50, we're going to push you right back up to negative 50. And that's where ground is going to be. We're never going to let you get less than the ground. All right. We're going to change our direction Y to 0 because now we've done. We're no longer falling. We don't need to fall anymore. We're not jumping anymore. So our direction on the Y is 0. And we're going to reset our is jumping to false. Okay, that's going to allow us to turn this on up here and allow ourselves to jump again whenever we want. Okay, perfect. Now, outside of that if statement, we want to take all of this value, all this movement on the Y, which we're now storing in the variable called Y. I want to take all of this movement and actually apply it to the player. So far, none of this is actually changing the Y value of our player yet. We want to do that in the last frame of the last call of the frame. So at the very end, after everything else is run, now we want to apply that movement to our player. So we'll say p.set Y, and it's going to be whatever the Y value is for that frame. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to set time sleep to 0.02. Okay, what that's going to do is it's going to make our game pause for 0.02 milliseconds. Okay, and it's going, or 0.02 seconds. So it's going to pause momentarily before it calls the next frame. Okay, beautiful. All right, so I said that was the last thing, but there's actually one more thing we need to do up here. On our screen, we need to change the way that Python draws graphics onto the screen. Currently, the way it draws graphics is with something called a tracer, and that tracer is set to a certain speed. But because we have a game that's drawing graphics in real time, and those graphics require our frames to all be handled at the same frequency, and because we want to make sure our game looks smooth, we're actually going to set our tracer to 0 so that our graphics get drawn instantly instead of at the rate that Python Turtle wants to draw them at. Okay, so we're going to set this tracer value to 0. And that's the last thing we need to do. Let's go ahead and test it and see if we can get our player to jump. So right now I have my player right there. If I press the space bar, theoretically, that player should jump. Hey, and he does. Look at that. Perfect. And there's a nice smooth movement. Okay, we get to the top of it and gravity starts pushing it right back down. That's really nice. That feels nice. Okay. Beautiful. Wow, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work to just get a player jumping on the screen. But we did it. And I think that's plenty for this video. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to create some enemies and get them to kind of rush at your player, and how to detect if your player is touching the enemy. We're going to set the game over to be equal to true. So we're going to end the game. So stay tuned for the next video. Thanks for paying attention, and I'll see you next time. Well, see you next time if I can learn how to speak. All right, bye.